record. I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Landon's not here yet, but I'm gonna go live and share this on Facebook.
Okay.
And then
Will they be able to see our faces?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're in it.
Let me frame myself a little bit better then.
Come on, Kitty, find your light.
I know, right?
So I every once in a while I'll message Lori, and I'll say I'll just bring it up to her because it was you're young, you're gonna do anything, you're convinced that this is gonna be something worthwhile. And so we're doing this. It's in Vegas for a pharmaceutical company. And it's Coast Pharmaceutical, KOS. And I remember that because that was part of the rap too. And so it was me. Oh wait, I gotta bring Landon in this. So Landon's here too. Do you know Landon?
I do not.
Landon.
Yo.
Kirksey, Katie Caussin.
Wow.
Hi, Katie.
Look at that groovy background. Nana's gonna have to figure out the background stuff.
I'm so groovy.
I was just telling Katie about this. Here we go. Got it. It's live streaming. So we're live streaming. I just was telling Katie about this. I did a corporate gig, and I might have told you this, Landon, where I was wrapping cholesterol. It was for a pharmaceutical company. It's all sales people, so it's all like alphas, and we're in Las Vegas, and it's me, Randy Smock, Eric Lindbergh, and Lori McLean, who's singing the hook.
Oh boy.
And so she has to walk out first. And again, they have no idea what's happening. We're kind of in between speakers. So you just hear this track start. And Lori's got a beautiful voice. So she's singing. So that's a little bit of an adjustment at these meetings of like, why is this person singing? And then these three dudes walk out rapping about we're the HDL cholesterol. And thanks for not letting your levels fall. And it's like, I tell people, it's like when a dog looks at a fan and they're not quite sure how it works. They're like, something's going on. And we had to, and you start and you're like, this is one of those stories that I know I'm going to tell friends later, but it's like you're like, this is 5 minutes. This is a long song. Yeah. It's a long. So we're selling it, but I pretty much felt like I had the most rhythm of the dudes who were rapping there. And it was like, you just, everything slows down. You're looking at each other. It's one of those shows, where you're looking at each other and you're like, this is the mid car wreck. We are in the middle of a car accident right now. And now we can just enjoy it because
exactly. It's that
right?
moment where you're like, oh, I'm dying. And then all of a sudden you like make that eye contact and you're like, all right, we're dying. We're going down together.
It's us together. Us together. And we've all done those corporate gigs. That is the one that is just like, I don't know if it got any better than that, than being a rapping cholesterol, decked out in like, I think we had football jerseys and we walked on stage. So it's like, it was met with tepid applause it was a combination of, hey, good try. And we do have appreciation for it. And is it over? All three.
Yeah.
So,
I can just envision the attendees of that conference, like leaving the conference, going back home to their families and like, yeah, there was this like rapping cholesterol. It was just like,
and you know what? It really made me think about my own cholesterol.
Right. Then it did its job.
There's
a whole documentary on
Yes.
Netflix.
Yes. It's all about that.
Oh it was amazing, and yet it gave me anxiety to watch as well. Like you were just like, oh.
Do you know Bill Cott's dad, I think, did some writing corporate type of stuff in his day, way back in the day. He did kind of some of that writing. Yeah, the documentaries, it's about, if it's the same one we're talking about, it's like musicals at these corporate events.
Yes.
It'd be like, and they're like, we got paid well. And I remember watching it saying, I get it. You're going in there, you're trying to do your job. You're not making fun of it. You're like, this is the most, those corporate gigs. It's like, how much are you going to pay? Yeah, absolutely. I will rap about cholesterol.
They're not roast.
No.
Like, you got to take that shit like seriously.
Right.
Yeah. And that there's always a couple of folks that are like, that was awesome. And they meant it. They're like, that was really entertaining.
Yes.
You're like, awesome. Thank you. I love you, Deb. Love you. Thank you.
This was so much better than The Good Doctor that I normally be doing at this time on a Tuesday evening.
Now, welcome, Katie. You and I have known each other almost 30 years now.
1993, I think, because I think that's the year. Did I get hired for Comedy Sports in 93 or 94? 93.
93, October 93.
Yes.
And yeah, there were 6 of us in that we got hired. And I thought it was great because one of the things I really appreciated about that group was we rehearsed for like 6 months before even doing a show, I believe. We rehearsed for a long time. And then you got put on sound and then you got put on lights and you started to see what the flow of the show was. So you went in, you were ready to go. So I have some of my fond memories of doing shows there and touring and with you also. Like we did a lot of these shows together. It was so fun.
Dude, I won a Comedy Sports Award one year for best driver. Because I would drive. Thank you.
Well earned.
Thank you. Because I
found
would
your
drive
niche.
to all the gigs.
Yes.
Yeah.
You were one of the few people that had a car.
So good. I know.
And you drove, not just driving to the gig, but there were times where you drove throughout the city to drop people off too.
Of course. Of course. That's so funny. Martin Garcia and I had a conversation about that once because he's from Texas. And, I'm from suburban DC. And so you always, when you gave people rides home, it might be a 15-minute drive, but that just was par for the course. And how people in the city, or at least in Chicago, they would get really weird. It could be literally half a mile, but it's the opposite direction. Be like, oh no, I'm going north. Sorry. and Martin's like, what happened to if you give somebody a ride home, it's wherever their home is. It's not conditional to, is it?
Which way?
Direction of traffic. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is it on the left? If it's on the right, then I can do it. If I have to cross, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Exactly. It's so true.
Yeah, but it was also those rides. A lot of times those were the best parts of the night, like the conversations and just getting to know folks.
Yep. Doing some illicit things and that tour.
Beat poetry, illicit.
That's of course, illicit.
I mean, we were kids. It was the 90s.
Oh my God. You see now, people are like, oh, they talk about age and they're like, they reference the early 2000s and you're like, oh my God,
oh my God.
I'm in my 30s there. But yeah, it was the 90s. And when we were first at Comedy Sports, first it was in a side room in a hotel. It was like when one of the Congress Hotel, and then it moved to the Improv Comedy Theater.
Right,
and
on Wells, yep.
On Wells, and we had this back room. And I feel like at that space, that was when I really started to get a lot of experience of what my stage persona was, how you perform in front of a group, how you get a group quick, because they were not there to see improv. They were there to see stand-up comedy. Yeah. And they would get up. And when we first got in there, Landon, we would watch, there would be somebody coming out in a ref uniform. About 5 minutes into their spiel, you would see a dozen people get up and leave. They would leave.
They went into the wrong, there were 2 rooms. There was the main room, which is where all the comedy stand-up was. And then it was the side, more smaller cabaret space. And people would always come that were there to see, Bill Maher, whoever.
Yeah.
come into our show, we're like, tweet.
Y'all ready for this? We're ready to leave.
Yeah, we're ready to leave.
Well, it was all about like, they didn't care. They gave tickets away, and they had people on these phone banks who would just be calling all day to get people into the room, and then it would be a 2-drink minimum. So it's like, whatever drink you ordered, they immediately brought 2. So whatever the drink was, that's how they made the money. And they're like, oh, I'd like to get one of these drinks in a souvenir glass, which was $12 or whatever at the time. And they'd bring 2. So they're like, it's a 2-drink minimum. So they made all their money on drinks. And the people who talked about our improv show, they didn't know, they'd never seen the show. They don't even really necessarily care. They just got to get people in there. So people were coming in constantly, and it was a us against them mentality. So we would, and we were also in a basement. The green room was a basement. So we had to walk up these stairs, and it was like going to battle sometimes. And you're like, all right, let's go in. And I remember once I was reffing, one of the first times I was the host of that show, and we had door guys working security there. And a guy walked up to the stage, walked up from the back of the house to the stage, sat down on the stage, and goes like this, and turns his back. He like kind of waves at me from the stage and turns his side. And I'm thinking, I might get stabbed. Like, this might be the end. And I'm looking for one of our door guys. Chris Cross was his name. And I'm looking for Chris, and I'm like, hey, help out here. And they finally removed him, but then let him back in at the same time. And it was like, so it was definitely, you did not know what was going to happen, and they didn't know what was going to happen. And you had to very quickly get them. You had to grab them very quickly.
Yeah.
And if you can keep the whole audience there, it was a success.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because, comedy sports also is like, rated PG comedy, G, sorry, you're right. Yes. No parental guidance suggested. General audiences. And and it's very structured, it's got its shtick, it's, sports theme thing, which is a lot, if we're gonna get into this, I've over the years, comedy sports was the redheaded stepchild kind of when we started out. And eventually it all became, intermingled, where every, IO people would do comedy sports and vice versa, all that stuff. But for a long time, it was kind of the, lesser.
Yeah. Right.
It's the McDonald's of improv. But I'll tell you what, those games, learning those, first of all, it's helped me as an improviser, as an actor, tremendously. Like auditions, because you have to make an immediate choice. You don't have 15 minutes to explore this and figure out what the scene's about. Like, you gotta out of the gate, and that has become very valuable over the years in all different kinds of contexts.
Now you have. Oh, go ahead, Landon.
Well, Jay, we talk about it a lot, or we have talked about it a lot, how like just short form in general, as opposed to long form, right? Like, and long form sometimes just means slow form for some people.
Yes.
Long. This is long.
Very long form.
Right, exactly. Yep. So like just I've always, and people, I don't know, right before the pandemic, I was teaching a lot of short form, and it was like, it's almost as if I looked around and there weren't a lot of people doing or teaching short form. And it was interesting to me because it's like, well, it's not super different. It's just getting to the thing a lot faster. That's really all it is to me anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. You can't luxury, and the structure that the game imposes on it gives you a roadmap for that.
Right.
I mean, not to get into it. What does UCB
we're
teach?
Getting into it. We're getting
game of scene. What's in it? It's game. It's like, what's the thing? And the difference is, you got somebody coming out saying, "Here's what we're doing," and then you watch the audience watches you try to achieve that or not. And a lot of times you don't achieve the game. Like that's the fun, is watching it like implode and destruct. And sometimes you do, and that's fun too. But you came I remember, and this, I don't know if this is a made up memory I have of you, but I seem to remember you coming from like more of an acting, you had more of acting chops and as opposed to a lot of people. And so what brought you, like what made you come in to improv or audition for that in the first place?
Yeah, I studied theater in college. That was my degree in theater. And then like my first paying acting job out of college was Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Ultra Plus.
Yeah, hang on. Don't worry. I got it. There you go.
You want a bucket for those names you're dropping?
I know, right? But which was really fun. And there were a lot of performers that came to work there in the summer that were from the Chicago area. I got to know, particularly like my first roommate, Michael Shapiro. He was like U of I guy, theater guy. And so they kind of were talking up Chicago because I worked there for like 3 summers. And then my good friend Heidi and I were like, well, do we want to move somewhere? I was still living in Northern Virginia, and New York seemed a little, I think, daunting to us. We'd heard about what a great theater scene Chicago had from all our friends we had made. And so we're like, let's move to Chicago. And so we did. And now I had heard of Second City because they came to my college. The touring company came to my college. I didn't come to Chicago with the intention to study like improv when I was in college. Now it seems like every college has an improv team. But when I was in college, improvisation was like a rehearsal tool, to kind of learn about your character. And Chicago.
What's up? That's my ride.
Right. So yeah, it was used as a rehearsal tool. And then when I moved to Chicago, I had met this guy who was like a friend of somebody I worked with at Busch Gardens, Kevin Scott. I don't know if you ever knew him.
Yep.
In New York. He's been in New York. He's part of what's the name of his group? Centralia.
Okay.
He's been, he and I think it's him and a couple other guys. But anyway, I ran into him randomly on the street shortly after I moved to Chicago, and we like recognized each other. We got to talking. He had this improv group that would perform on Wednesday nights in Rogers Park at the No Exit Cafe called Bang Bang.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, you should come check us out. And then he was kind of finishing up his conservatory at Second City, and he told me all about it. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. Maybe I'll audition for that conservatory. And so I did, and I got in, and then Kevin invited me to be in Bang Bang. And that just kind of set the whole trajectory on the improv path, and less so on the theater path.
If you knew, we look at conservatory now, or Second City Conservatory, and you hear these stories of like, I flew there to audition, or I moved here for conservatory, all that stuff. If it was that way, would you have approached the audition differently if it was this thing that was like, I gotta get this, versus, it sounds fun?
Probably. I mean, I'd probably put a lot more importance on. I mean, I was, I really wanted to get in, and it was a big deal to me when I got in and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I didn't have all this kind of weight on it as much. It was like, well, let's check this out and see if it sticks, and I got in, and I was like, great.
And the really good sketch performers or improv performers have acting chops, and they're just acting in that spontaneous moment. So it's, right. I'm sure you've told folks too, when they're like, what can I do as an improviser? It's like, go take an acting class, go understand that.
In fact, and I hope this isn't jumping ahead too much, that's part of what I'd like to see in kind of woven into improv classes, especially in the introductory levels, a little bit more stagecraft, a little just theater basics even, because you've got people from which is the beauty of improv, right? You've got people from, it's not just like, oh, actors, it's people from all different backgrounds that are attracted to this, that, you know, are mathematicians or lawyers or whatever, like you name it. And they're very naturally funny or quick-witted and all that kind of stuff. And just to take some time, and some teachers do, but it's not a standard thing where you're taught as an improv student, even just stage left, stage right.
Oh my God. Oh
Yeah.
my
Or just
God.
like stage picture, like just knowing where
Yeah.
you
Right.
are. I
Don't
think
upstage
especially,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, especially coming from the pandemic where many of us, you know, weren't on stage for a couple of years. And so it's the easiest thing to forget whenever you're watching students play. I've noticed this in my own classes where I'm I'm telling people to turn around all the time because
Yes.
they're not facing the audience, and it's not even occurring to anyone, right? Like,
Yeah.
and of course, why would it? Because we haven't dealt with a stage in a while.
Well,
Yeah,
but you also
exactly.
you also have some folks too who are like, and I'm not a fan of this, but they go like, oh, screw the audience, be real, all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but you're still performing. You're in front of people. You're having an audience there. And it's not woven into the curriculum, you know? And I think it's been changed. And if you're lucky enough to have someone as a teacher coming up who talks about stage picture, they'll focus on it. But if you're being taught by someone who doesn't have that experience or doesn't see the importance, it kind of gets dropped. And Katie, I just only wish you had a position at a theater that could make that. No, I'm joking. Congratulations. You are now the co-artistic director of, is it IO 2.0? Is it the new IO? Is it just IO? It's IO is
IO
closed.
classic, but improved, new and improved. I don't know what that's called.
Classic Coke, Katie Caussin.
No, maybe that isn't a good term.
Yeah,
right.
Elicit some. Yeah, exactly.
No. But it's a huge deal. Congratulations.
It is a huge deal. I'm so excited. You know, especially at this stage in my career, and having
she used air quotes for those of you listening.
Right.
Well, she used one air quote.
You know, struggling, aka a 30-year struggling actor career. You know, to be able to use all the stuff that I've experienced in this community and hopefully make it a better place with that. And I think it's refreshing too, you know, other than annoyance, you know, it's traditionally Second City and IO have been run by people that aren't professional, don't do the work. They're not from this kind of thing. And I think particularly, obviously, with all the problems in the environment and obviously the world and in our microcosm of the improv community and in the past few years, there's a lot of embedded problematic behavior, white, straight, male-centered, no offense, guys.
Podcasts.
Lots to
But what I'm saying is you're the enemy.
Yeah.
You know, just
it's true.
Centered, you know, like if we really want to decenter and our managing producer, Kim Whitfield, who's a badass, you know, and like she says, decolonize, you know, the shows, the way we frame those shows and also within the training of it as well. And what was my original point? I don't even remember.
Well, you were talking about making that transition and using these 30 years of your experience to go into this position now, which, as you talked about, it was during the pandemic, a lot of theaters closed, and a lot of theaters had, and IO included, had situations where it's like, are you just going to pay lip service? Are you just saying that this is an issue? Or are you going to do something to change it? Because if you talk to improv students, 90% of their teachers or more have been white males. Honestly, I mean, that's what it's been for the longest time. And so there is that concern of folks of like, okay, cool. We hear where IO is going to go. We heard it was sold. We heard it's coming back. But now what's going to, like, you know, what's going to be different? Because I feel like at this point in the world, a lot of places are kind of easing back to the way things were. And they're like, wow, we weathered that storm. Now we can kind of go back to what's familiar. And I think that's a fear of a lot of folks.
I'm very familiar with that, having worked at other places
Yes.
in the past year that did a management overhaul, and supposedly we're going to change things and have not at all because they. I don't know. It's not really cool. I have to. This is the thing I'm dealing with right now. It's like I've got this new position, right? So like I can't really talk shit. It's probably not cool to talk as much shit as I would as just me.
Well, but you're also saying talk shit, like you're not really talking shit. We're talking about what the current situation is.
The actual reality of the situation,
the actual reality.
Which is not great. And I think a lot of these places, I mean, we've all been around for a fair amount of time and been involved with different organizations and theaters. Unfortunately, it feels like this hard reset is the thing that needed to happen. So, and it just happened to happen because of external events. But I think that hard reset is necessary. So now it's nice to see people like you come in and actually make good on that reset rather than go back to the other things.
I mean, that's the goal. You know, we're all of us that are running it, you know, aside from, you know, managing the initial management team. I'll tell you how this process happened, because this is what they did right. The guys who bought
who bought, for those who don't know, take us through like who bought it, how like you're talking about.
Yeah.
But who are the people that bought IO?
The company is called Terrico. They're a real estate developer, big real estate developer here in Chicago. They're probably best known for, they own all the Chicago athletic clubs. But they've got a bunch of different the commercial real estate stuff that they do. And so they're, you know, a handful of white guys that bought this theater that know that they that know that they're a bunch of white guys that don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
They knew IO, they knew it was a Chicago institution, and they didn't want to see it go away. And they're like, this would be a cool thing to add to our, you know, portfolio. And so they hired Mick Napier and Jen Eslin, the artistic directors and business owners of the Annoyance Theater, who are working artists themselves and have been in the community for years and years. Hired them as consultants to come in and put together their management team and kind of guide us the first few months into this process of reopening the theater.
And there must have been, Katie, there must have been some pushback with that too, because it's like still at this level, before the management team was announced, it's still just white folks. And then people are like, oh no, what is going on? But then as who were named to this management team emerge, it's like, oh, okay. They're making those choices. Yeah,
because, you know, Mick and Jen know what's up. You know, it's like they may be middle-aged folks like myself. You know, they're with it. They've been running a theater. They've been directing and performing. They do all the stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they get how it works. And
successfully as well. I mean, you know,
exactly.
Out of all of these storms.
Exactly,
not just
because they have always had the safest comedy space, improv space in the city. You know, the
safest comedy for the performers, but the material they're doing is completely
yes,
everything
subversive,
goes. That's the interesting dichotomy there. It's like it's safe for the performers. You see a different person on stage, a different representation. So in that sense, it's safe. But then, they're doing subversive theater and have been for years, hence the name.
Yep.
Yeah. And, you know, and obviously Mick and Jen knew that a diverse management team was a high priority. And that's what they put together, you know. And I loved, you know, it was the first thing I said in my interview. I love that you're doing a co-artistic director thing, because. So
you knew that. You knew they were looking for a co.
That was the list. Yeah, they put a listing out in League of Chicago Theaters.
Okay.
And, on their job site, and I loved that idea of, it's a collaborative art form, and being to collaborate with another artistic director rather than like, okay, Jay, it's all you. I know
Thank you.
I know
Finally.
you love that. I know.
It's my thing, Katie. You know
Bad
me.
example. Just to be able to collaborate with somebody. And then the other, Adonis Holmes, who's the other co-artistic director, he's 27 years old, different generation than me. He's African-American. He's been doing this work. He's such an impressive guy. And was great is, like, from the outset, we probably, at first glance could not be more different. But we are very much on the same page about where we want to take it and the kind of programming that we want to have in there. And I think it's going to be really cool to have our two different sides of the equation kind of coming together to figure that all out. And
isn't that what improv is supposed to be? Different people, bring your voice, and we'll make it work together, not the same voice. It's like, no, let's have different instruments singing this song and we'll make it work together.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the whole management team, like, collectively from the outset are like, yes, we have our individual responsibilities. You're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, but we're going to work together as a team on what, every kind of from the programming to the food and beverage, all of it.
Right.
That's very much how we want to operate, like an improv team.
And you want to get into the F&B, the food and beverage part more, right, Katie?
That was actually I asked, I know you're asking for co-artistic directors, but I really would love food and beverage.
I mean, that's my dream ever since my Busch Garden days. I really would sit there and watch the food and beverage folks. And I'm like, one day, Katie, one day.
Yeah, you really took the long way around, but you got there. And that's the important part.
You gotta find an in some way.
How long was that process, the interview process? How long?
When did they put that? I think they put it up. We're in May now. I think they put it up like in March or so. Okay. Because there was definitely like about 6 weeks between my first interview and my second interview, because these guys, they bought it's a new business. They bought the name, they bought the building, but the business is new, so we got to deal with all that licensing stuff,
right?
What the timeline is dependent on. And they're also doing a little bit of a makeover. They're not overhauling and completely renovating the space, but they're gonna zhuzh it up and
parking
get a little
parking. Are you gonna have parking?
Yeah, right on the stage. It's
well, that's always one of the things.
Jay, we're going to encourage a more ecological minded community, because we have very close access to buses and trains, and aren't there enough cars on the highway?
Yes, that's some capital M messaging right there.
And who else is a part of the management team besides who else has been hired since this started?
So myself and Adonis Holmes, co-artistic directors, and then our managing director is Steve Plock, and Kim Whitfield is our managing producer, and then Rachel Mason is the director of education.
I mean, that's right there. It's like, wow, what a really strong lineup to kickstart this. And like Landon said, I think that reset is definitely long. It's been long in the making, long needed. And now it's like, what an exciting opportunity to see where this can go. What can you do now, especially when it seems that you've got folks behind you who are saying, you worry about the programming. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to worry about, doing a little more remodeling of the interior of that bar, so it doesn't look like a warehouse, which it did at first.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the biggest thing they're addressing, just to make it a little bit more,
welcoming.
Welcoming, exactly.
Which is kind of a metaphor for the overhaul of that theater. It's like we want to make it a little more inviting, and that's the whole point of doing this. To me, is like, everybody plays. Let's find a space for you. Come in, bring your voice. If you go to an improv show and you don't see a representation of you on stage at any point, you're going to see one show because your friends ask you to, or your coworker asks you to. But if you see a representation, you see your point of view, you see something you can connect with, and that's how it's going to grow.
Well, and it's just frankly more interesting. I can just say as a passive viewer of entertainment, now that they have, obviously they're producing more and more diverse types of stories and diverse points of view. And I have been like, this is great. You know what I mean? Like, it's so much more interesting, and being able to discover things that maybe you were ignorant to or weren't aware of, but also finding like the commonalities as well that you maybe had all the preconceived notion stuff. For everybody, it's more entertaining to have all these different kind of backgrounds represented.
Are you going to do any? Are you looking into the digital space or virtual space at all? Are you looking to do any hybrid stuff with like keeping the Zoom classes or doing shows, combining the two? I think that's something that people are wondering about. Is like, how is that going to continue?
Yeah, we're starting off actually with which should launch next month. We're starting with online classes. That's how we're
Improv scoop, Improvcast scoop.
Just a smattering. Give you an amuse-bouche, of
F&B, food and beverage.
Boom, we got it.
Everything comes back to the food. We'll start with that, and then hopefully this is kind of the rough timeline we're looking at, like getting back in-person classes by August. July or August, and then soft opening at the beginning of September. Getting shows back in there, which, Adonis and I are working on now, finding, we want to at least, obviously we don't have like the place already up and running to create new shows just yet. So, we're reaching out to other shows, other teams and stuff like that to bring, at least to be the initial programming for that. And right now we're putting together, before we even launch all that, it has become our priority to put together a DEI advisory council, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, a lot of businesses do. Other theaters, comedy theaters have done it, but we're very intent on having them be than just something that's for optics. Like, hey, we're cool. We got a DEI council, guys.
Right.
Like, we really want their contribution to the programming and to the curriculum, just to have them consulting on, again, a kind of decolonizing and decentering the white, narrative, so that it is inclusive of all types of people, including, differently abled. I think when we think of diversity, it's often just, Black and brown people, but there's all different kinds of diversity. Obviously, LGBTQ plus. I mean, that's the thing. We want IO to be gayer. To quote Adonis, we want to make it a little, make it gayer. Yeah. And definitely more diverse, just because that's just, listen, you and I, we've been doing this for 30 years, and it's like, let's try to do something different. I mean, let's see different things. Let's see what we can do. So much of the artistic direction of the theater is really going to be dictated by the artists we get in there, and what they want to do and what they want to say. And we really want to create a space to be able to develop new voices, develop new works. Obviously long form is our bread and butter, but that, and the Herald will be there, but that's not going to be.
Does it have to?
It'll be there, but it's like the focus is more long forms.
Right.
And the Herald is one of those. Yeah.
Do you have in mind an idea of, for programming, is there going to be a process where people can submit proposals? Is it developed through a class, like, or is it going to be a combination? Or you're not sure right now?
All of the above. I mean, we're still formulating a lot of these things, but we definitely will have just finished drafting that this week, a show proposal process. And that's what we're figuring out now. IO produced shows versus outside shows, all that kind of different kind of stuff. Because, there's two main spaces there. The Del Close Theater, which will most likely be renamed, and the Mission Theater. And so to have IO centric kind of programming in the one space, and then the other space is up for grabs, that could, we definitely want to get stand up in there, like an open mic night, like just a place for people to work out, if not, some other headliner. I mean, not like headliner, not like, John Mulaney or Dave Chappelle or something like that,
but why not, right? Like,
but hey, why not? If they want to donate their time.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I mean, it would not surprise me if when developing the material, they hear about a room, they hear about one of those rooms, it's like they pop in. I mean, because that's what they're looking for, a place to develop stuff, especially a place where they're not announced and they can just go in and work on material. And if it's I mean, there's been those spaces like the Shithole or Lincoln Lodge. And it's like
Lincoln Lodge is great.
And Landon was in the early 2000s. Like, when was it, Landon? The 2000s?
Yeah, early 2000s, mid 2000s.
He was a part of that scene with those guys.
Scene as well. Yeah, so that was, there weren't any rooms really other than Lincoln Lodge and then some other bar shows here and there in Chicago. Yeah. I mean, you had Zanies, but that was not a thing. It wasn't really a hip thing, right? Like, so I think you build the room right, and there's limitless potential with that, I feel.
Yeah, I would love, just to create our own little stand-up sub scene, within there. Because I think to your point, Landon, is like, you create a scene that's cool, Hannibal Buress might drop by.
Exactly, right. Yeah, I what do you feel about, so kind of piggybacking on that, like building community is such a huge part of any improv theater or comedy theater, I would argue, in that space. I mean, even back then, part of what was so cool about that stand-up scene was there was a community, in that stand-up scene, which you don't hear about for much culture for stand-up comedy that much.
Is the Elevated before your time, Landon? Do you remember the Elevated, Jay?
I do remember the Elevated. Yeah,
that was.
It was Kane Collier's room. It was Diversey and Halstead, and was it Halstead? No, Diversey and Sheffield.
Yes.
And it was not just stand up, but it was like Jay Ferrari and I did that 2-man group, Men of Leisure, where we did this kind of alternative comedy. And he used to say, the alternative comedy scene is sometimes alternative to being funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it was a great, Kane was very kind. He's like, you want to do 5 minutes? Like, he never talked about what we're going to, and I love those kind of spaces. It's like, don't just come here and jerk off and do it for no point, but like, try stuff out. Yeah. Try material. And you had like Bang Balutansky and Kane Collier. Remember Bang? I
do.
And the Caterpillars, Deb Downing's singing duo. And it was like W. Kamau Bell. Remember W. Kamau Bell? So W. Kamau Bell, who's now doing a whole bunch of stuff on CNN and stuff, was like a frequent performer there. And you'd watch these, and it was awesome. And it was like you said, a cool vibe. And you're like, sometimes you'd go, I'm not sure, like people would come up to us and say, I'm not sure what I'm watching, but I can't stop watching what you guys do. And it's like, cool. We didn't really know either, but you'd follow the vibe of the room. So these rooms got to be really cool. And you heard about this thing. And I think the Shithole's another place in Chicago that kind of did that, where they had these like secret, they would release where it was going to be. You had to know and be on some sort of list. And then you go up, it's like in a garage or an attic somewhere. And it was awesome. Yeah. And like Bob Odenkirk would stop by and watch this stuff. And it became this happening. And I think early in the days of IO, like when early on, it was like, that's what I felt like it was. On the one side, nobody showed up. But on the other side, it's like, we're doing stuff that's like wow, this is really cool. The way you all did that whole piece was about hockey, and each edit was you were skating around, and there was wow, I want to come back. I'm not sure exactly what I saw. And I think we got to a point with long form where it's like, oh, I know what I see, because it's the same. It's a 4-minute opening that people do half-ass because they don't know how to do it. They look at each other. Then it's a series of 3-minute scenes, and then it's some sort of game, and it's like it becomes the same over and over, and it's the same faces. And to get a different feeling, a different vibe, it's like, I don't know, go up there and just, go nuts on the stage for 20 minutes, and then go up there and do thoughtful stuff or whatever it is. But having that different, it's something you have to come see it. That's the thing. You have to come see this. I'm not even sure I can explain what it is.
No, I hear you. I think, you need to have a place in the community where you can try stuff and you can fail.
Yes.
And it's not life ending. You know what I mean? It's like,
I'm not a failure. I just failed. This just failed.
Exactly. And because I think that, I've been definitely hungry for it for a long time. Is, Chicago's supposedly the comedy improv mecca, training ground. And I haven't really seen it evolve,
It hasn't.
Comedy, what the comedy coming out of here, it seemed like it just, from my perception, for a long time, UCB kind of held that mantle. That's where kind of like these really interesting performers or interesting kind of shows were coming out of, kind of edgier and kind of, stuff we haven't seen before.
Right.
And that was them for a while. And then it's like, where we find, I mean, it's somewhere. I know it's somewhere that I'm just ignorant to, but where do we need to create a space where things can be tried that will push us to that next, you know.
Well, you also had people, you didn't have people who went and searched it out, right? You didn't have people, it's like, I'm going to go look in these communities, and I'm going to sit there, and I'm going to go to different venues, and I'm going to search out where we can see that or get inspired or things like that. You just had these theaters kind of, they got so known that there was no incentive to go off of that, because we've monetized our product. And so any deviation from that,
mess with that. Yeah.
I mean, you remember when Pinata Full of Bees came out at Second City, and everybody in the community was like, oh my God, it's going to change. And then there was a rumor that SNL was going to be a herald, like it was going to morph into that. And then it was like, no, they couldn't put up a show that the audience hated, half the audience hated and half loved. They couldn't take that chance because they were too big.
Yeah. It's, I have to say, Pinata, definitely there is the first time and only time I've seen somebody take the format of a traditional Second City review and kind of completely deconstruct it and turn it on its head and make it something different. And definitely the, handful of shows, there are several shows after that kind of used that sensibility that Pinata brought. But then that becomes the standard, right?
And
where now it's like, we can't have any scene that's over 2 minutes and that has real human beings in it.
But I got a plus on you, Katie. We'll just hit a blackout with loud music. That'll be our out to whenever. It used to be take out a gun and shoot someone. Now it's like blackout loud music. And
exactly. It's needle drop, that's your out.
Needle drop, that's it. And you're looking at like, you start to talk about the financial aspect and the money. And part of this too is like, it's great to be creative. It's also like what brings in, I've always felt like a theater needs one show that kind of bankrolls it. The show that's like the gimmick show, or the show that's like, this is the show people go to see, it pays the bills. And then once they can get to a point where they have more options and more kind of that diverse selection, you can maybe phase that out a little, or another show takes the place of that as they're going. And so, there was you and I talked a little bit about this, of like that whole situation of in 2020 when the pandemic hit, there were lots of folks who had signed up for intensives, and then the intensives got canceled, and the response of IO 1.0, whatever it was like basically like, sorry, or take this this online class. Now, we've been talking about community, and that's the whole point. We're dying to come into Chicago and study at IO, was that I'm going to be immersed in this with people from all over the world, and then they're going to take it to their parts of the world. So what do you know about that situation of like, hey, intensive students?
Yeah, everybody is going to get credits. So for intent, put towards whether it's an online class, an in-person class, or obviously there won't be intensives this year, hopefully next year. They do have
like summer ones, like you're thinking next year or whenever it's safe.
Yeah, whenever we're able to do that. And there's a whole data. We have all the people that have paid for classes that did not get the classes. So they will get credits. So they can use that, what they paid for classes, towards future classes.
And it's exciting to get this position.
That's not ideal, but unfortunately, I know other places paid back that money that people had put out. I think because this business changed hands, that was the trickiest thing.
Yeah. It's the solution that you kind of are forced into making, but you still have that solution at least.
Yeah.
And you also, you had heard the stories of it. So walking into this, the excitement of, wow, this opportunity, I can really make a change. I can help people achieve their artistic vision. We can make a change. That's also balanced out with, all right, let's sit and have a conversation about the shit that happened before. And let's, it's not all the excitement of the new stuff. It's like, what do we have to resolve? What do we have to deal with? What are those skeletons that we've got to address moving forward? Because the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can move forward.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about our management team, because, I was never an IO person. I did a couple random shows at IO over the years. And obviously, like, I was there, seeing all coworkers.
But you didn't go, did you go through training? You didn't really go through training. Yeah.
No. So in a way, like, my knee jerk was like, well, I wasn't an IO person. Like, am I, okay, like, am I qualified to even apply for this job? But then I was like, well, maybe that's kind of the point, is like, obviously Rachel Mason was an IO person, and Steve on the management side was an IO person, and performer as well, I should say. So they have institutional knowledge, which is going to be helpful, because it's like, you don't want to walk in like having no idea what the problems were. So
right.
And then the rest of us who are enough part of the community that those problems were not just unique to IO. So we're all aware of the issues, and hopefully ignorant to the things that we need to be ignorant to, having not come from IO. I think I think, again, the advantage of having people come in there, that it wasn't just like, hey, let's find these 5 actors and throw we all have relevant experience that enables us to be in a management. I managed a hair salon, so and other people have done like film type producing and film production type stuff, and do stand up and do all kind of Renaissance people, hopefully. So
you're managing people.
Yeah,
you're managing people, and you're going into it. What it sounds like is you're going into also with that knowledge of like, hey, there's shit I don't know. There's shit that I can't. There's things I can't answer that there are other people more qualified to answer for me. I'm going to listen to what's going on. We're going to hear that. I'm going to take people's advice and their comments, and then somebody's got to make the decision. That's the thing. Somebody's got to make it. We cannot run by a democracy. You run by, come to us, let's hear what it is. And then
you may not always make the popular decision either,
But if but if you're heard, it changes things. Even if you don't make the decision I want, it's like, well, you've heard me. I get a sense you have heard me, and now you're making the decision. So that's part of it.
Right. And, we're front loading this reopening with, we're developing our artistic statement, our community, all of those values that we want to be able to, front load this with, this is where we're coming from. This is how we hope to implement change. But at the end of the day, the proof will be in the pudding.
Right.
And, we're just going to have to demonstrate, show, don't tell, right? We're going to have to demonstrate our intentions and demonstrate by how we people the theater, and not have the same old, problematic people back in positions of power and things like that, and influence. So
why did you look right at me, Katie, when you just said that last part? No, it's true, and you have to.
Jay. Problematic.
Well, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, Jay.
That's right. Other shoe.
I think there's so many shoes. I think it's a 12 to 18 month process before. I think when you hit that mark, like 18 months, it's like, okay, this is kind of the new direction of where it's going to be. And we've seen that with other theaters recently in town, where it's like, oh, we're making that commitment, and then 12 to 18 months later, things have started to change, because it is messy. It's painful. It is a process. You have to work at it. You can't just let it go. You have to work at it. You have to self-assess, right? And all these things that can be very, very painful in the short term. And then how do we balance that with bringing revenue in at the same time? And that's it. How do you balance scheduling people? Like, it's all these things that you don't understand. Man. Commerce. And it's true. I mean, yes.
It's also funny that, funny, maybe not funny, but it's interesting that it's not just y'all. It's also, there's not one, not two, but three by my count, like theaters that are going through almost the exact same sort of processes at the exact same time. So it's interesting that it's, it's not a race, but I wonder, from your perspective, do you will you be looking around to see what others are doing, just either to combat some of these issues or to gauge others' progress in, reopening certain things?
I certainly, again, having just freshly worked at another comedy institution in Chicago, and knowing and having worked there for over 20 years.
Right. The Giggle Snort Hotel. It's a comedy hotel.
We can all say the Giggle Snort in Schaumburg. We all know it.
Exactly.
Trying to get there. Still trying to get there.
There's all sorts of how not to do it that I have accumulated. And I even said that in my interview. I was like, I guess I'm going to have to take all the bitching I've done all these years and put my money where my mouth is.
Yes.
Because, when you sit around and have these conversations about, well, what they should do is, but, we've all had these conversations a million times. And so now it's like, okay, now it's time to do what they should have done.
Right. Take the crown, queen. There you go.
But as to looking to other places, I don't know in terms of how they're running their theaters. I mean,
I think it's just as not even as examples, just interesting that everyone is trying to kind of build back up from a similar place, I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure that they will all do it, very differently. They'll have different approaches to different things, and some will be successful, and others I don't know if they will be.
Yeah, I think we're lucky in that Second City is a professional union theater. Mm-hmm. And so, and they do scripted content.
Giggle Snort Hotel, not the Giggle Snort Hotel.
Giggle Snort.
Yeah. And so while there's obviously in the Venn diagram of what like annoyance and IO do and what Second City does, there's, because IO and annoyance do all of it. It's just not union
right
work and, and not as high a production values. And so what's great about spaces like annoyance and IO is what we were talking about before is there, because we're not paying all these performers union wages each week, just because what they're doing is different. It's not scripted material for the most part. We have the liberty of allowing them to develop and create and come up with new stuff and not, I feel like the way it's set up is not as gatekeepy. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And two things, some come through in the chat. One is Jillian Bellinger asked, since Landon is in a holodeck, is he live? And I'm pretty sure you are. Are you live right now, Landon?
I'm very live. It's live is happening.
And Philip asked, how do you balance the how not to do it with trying new things, inviting new cultural perspectives, etc.? So I think got into
that again.
How do you balance how not to do things with trying out new things, inviting new cultural perspectives, things like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the DEI advisory council is going to be huge in terms of that, because we all have blind spots, and to have a group of people whose sole purpose is to kind of like keep their eye on things like that, and be able to point out to us like, this seems pretty homogenous, or this, I think that is going to be the main, and again, intentions are only worth so much until you put it into actions. And we're developing systems to put into place that aren't going to advantage one group over another group.
So you're not going to fire the head of the DEI committee or the committee, right? You're not going to fire them.
If they disagree with me, I will fire them.
Okay, that makes sense. Well,
I get a little bit of power and I turn fascist AF.
Yeah. Oh, rule by fear. Rule by fear.
I mean, that is, it is an exciting. We have this is, for me, this rebirth or this whatever's happening right now. Like you said, the gatekeepers are less. It's not that they're no more, but they are. They've gone away. Theaters are reforming or going in new direction, whatever it is. There's an excitement about it. And I'm very excited about the virtual aspect. I know a lot of students don't want to go into a classroom to take a class. They have issues with anxiety. They have issues with eye contact, whatever it is. They just don't want to leave where they are. Whatever the reason is, I think people have found that as a great alternative. So I think we have been for 20 years pretty much cruising along, that this is going to be super exciting. And I remember having a conversation with someone at a theater that I was a facilitator with. And I said, hey, if you need to remove me in place of a different perspective or a different, whatever it is, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm going to be fine. I'll find places to get employment. And if my time is done, awesome. I think there is a value in. I think
you're fired finally.
Yeah, it's like, thank God. But I think Will Hines had a good idea, and he's a funny dude. But he had a good idea. He's like, he was toying with doing a virtual school, and he started to do it. And he's like, 2 years you can't perform anymore after 2 years. And I'm like, that's kind of actually a good thought. Is like, if you don't recycle your folks, then you give more people opportunities in that situation. So there's an excitement too, because you're kind of setting new rules right now. It's a reset with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Believe me, our first meeting, it wasn't like chaotic, but it was like, we're all just so excited and everybody's got all these ideas of how we want things to be. And and we're all kind of like randomly very much on the same page, just, you know, by chance, but we're all just like, and then this, it's like, it took a minute for everybody like, okay, let's settle down.
Well, when was the last time you went into an improv situation with that kind of excitement, right? Especially like in an administrative role, like we kind of feel dragged into this. So to have that excitement of like, we can't wait to get started. We're headed towards the same direction, but let's see what happens. I mean, that's really nice. That's good to hear.
I mean, my slogan that I pitched at the end of our very first meeting was, let's make IO great again. But nobody, hello?
They didn't, weird. They didn't,
you got it.
Mioga.
Yeah,
No.
Mioga, obviously.
Do not let that bit die, Katie.
Right.
You've got to just put it into the ground and do it again and dig it up and show it again.
I think you ought to push your opening to January 6th.
Thank you.
Just have that.
Thank you, Landon.
Put it on t-shirts. Always remember January 6th.
Never forget. Never forget.
Right.
Are there, Margot Escott says, glad about these changes, especially room for applied improv for folks with different abilities, and asks if there's a David Shepard room. And I don't think a lot of people know who David Shepard is. He was one of the founders, I believe, of the committee in San Francisco. He's a founder of Second City and of IO and of Improv Olympic. And so I think while we don't hold on to the past, it's definitely very advantageous for us to remember the folks like Viola Spolin and David Shepard and Neva Boyd and all those folks that allowed us to continue to move this forward as we go. And are you thinking of, I know it hasn't even opened yet, but is there any plans for any other theaters for IO in different cities? Like they had a strong presence out here in Los Angeles, right. And you know, the street that IO and Second City and Hollywood were on is just awful. I hated the location of it.
Oh, well, I did go to IO West. I did like I sat in on a show that Mark Warzeka had done. It was like his version of Real Time with Bill. It was like a talking head kind of, it was cool. And then of course, I went to that Second City space as well. I mean, that would be, obviously that's down the road. I mean, this place has got to open and make some money and do really well. Yeah.
So there's no like one step at a time kind of thing. There's no plans in the moment, but it is a possibility because it was, especially for folks who moved out there from Chicago or just that community thing. To have that community
space too, because I don't, I know there's way more places like West Side. There's way more places out there, little theater type places there that traditionally weren't there, and more of a scene there than was before. IO was part. That was one of those places out there. But of course, that place had a lot of problems.
Oh my God. Including getting shot, like they shot the door and a car ran through the window of the door, and they put interns as security at the door when they wanted to not pay. I mean, I know it's in the past, but still, it's like, come on, you look at the past of theaters and you're like, improv, any theaters. And we saw a reckoning with the Chicago theater scene too, where it's like, are you kidding me? And for some reason, things that happen in theaters and improv theaters, if it was any other business, would be not only grounds for dismissal, but probably prosecution at some point as well. But changing that mentality to be like, yes, it's an area for us to play. It's a playground. It's a form of community. Yeah. Also, there are boundaries, and we want to make it safe for people because people leave and they never come back. And then they talk about it. They never say why. Some do, but some don't. And it's because it's not a safe space. And the whole point we got into this is you found people like you, didn't necessarily look like you, but had that same, like you said, that same mentality. Like with you and Adonis, you're like, oh, we connect. We connect on a way that we can form this partnership. And we have to reinstitute that and be like, hey, there's got to be an element of safety here for us to also for us to do our best work.
And safety, I think, too, in that you can slip up. You can make a mistake and it can be addressed and you have the opportunity to fix that. And then if you don't, obviously, then we don't want you around. But it's like, you know, there's also the other extreme, right? Knee jerk kind of reaction to things, and writing people off because of their missteps. But at the same time, you know, historically, you know, there would be people all the time that all of a sudden they found themselves cast out and they never knew why, because they were never told.
Yes.
And never given the opportunity to, I mean, we've all said and done things that are heinous.
Why are you pointing right at, she's pointing right at my face.
Wow.
Well, but also with that, it's like, I think one of the reasons people were cast out was because there was no result of their action.
Yeah,
they weren't held accountable.
No consequences.
There's no consequences. So then it's like, if there's no consequence to this action, then either we have, but if there's a process in place, if there's like, nope, we've gone through those steps. We have, who do we go? Another thing is, who do I go to talk to? If I go to talk to the person in charge who doesn't believe me, or goes on social media and says I'm a liar, right? All of those things then lead to all this dysfunction that then people go, oh, it's a mess. Not just, and I've always said improv is one art form that people see a show, it's bad, or hear about something, they'll never see improv again. It's not like that with any other form. They'll never see an improv show. They go, all improv is like this. They won't say that about music or plays or stand up. They'll say that about improv. So if they hear,
they say that about ska music. So I think
Landon, you shut your fucking mouth. Scott's here to stay. Speaking of which, Katie, what about a ska influenced improv show?
Okay, bye.
Katie, we don't want to. We do want to respect your time, and I want to thank you for joining us, of course. But before we let you go, and also I agree with what Jay was saying, and I think it kind of boils down to accountability too. It sounds like, Katie, that like part of what this whole thing is about putting these people and committees in place to where someone can be held accountable from multiple angles.
And to that point, because that's another system we're putting in place. If it's an independent entity outside of, because I believe annoyance has that too. And if you ever feel like whatever occurs and you did not get the response, nobody was held accountable for it, it's an independent kind of party that you can report to, that then will hold us accountable.
Right.
Or if you don't feel comfortable, something like that. So yeah, accountability. I mean, yeah, that's the theme for the world right now, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, for this country, and yeah. So I'm just really excited to have, stuff that you would, like you were saying, and our managing producer Kim brought this up too. It's like there's a balance between erasure, right, of the past, or of people, elements of the past, people that built that theater. You've got to give respect and credit to people who developed that style, who developed that theater. You don't want to erase them at all, but it's like, who do we choose to put front and center, to glorify?
Right.
Well,
and I think, we've talked about it on this show a lot, Jay, but like, it's not just glorification. It was like deification in a lot of ways for certain things that, probably don't make any sense at all. Or definitely never made sense to me personally.
It doesn't make sense.
It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Katie, what is your great, this may be, you may not have thought about this, but what is like your pie in the sky, no limit? What is your hope for this new iteration of IO?
I want to see in your I want to see some of the best comedy in Chicago, definitely on your prime Thursday through Sunday nights, prime time shows. Like, you're going to go and you're going to see stuff that that you would want to see at IO, that maybe, the long form, the celebration of long form, or different types of forms, even the Herald, all of that kind of, IO brand, if you will, but then populating even that stuff with all different kinds of faces and points of view. And then I just want to see like somebody come in there and create something that we haven't seen before and give them the space to create that. I want to get groups, I want to, collaborate maybe with other theaters to develop different types of shows, people from other types of artistic disciplines and things like that. Not just your straightforward, okay, can we get a suggestion of a location? Right. And
Santa Fe, New Mexico, Santa Fe.
A non-geographical location you could fit on this stage.
A stage in Santa Fe, the Santa Fe stage.
Oh God.
Well, it was when the news popped up, it was like, oh my God, like and then I learned more about who was part of the management committee and things like that. It was like, what a great selection of how to move this forward, update it, change what went wrong in the past, but then work on having it be that artistic home that, for everything good and bad with IO, it was something that was a part of that artistic community. And for a lot of folks, it built into their sensibilities and it made connections. And you had a lot of folks who I know, because of the location in Wrigleyville in Chicago, would walk by and go, I'm going to take a class there. And it ended up being like an Andy St. Clair who went on to do Second City and write. Like you had a lot of folks like that and then you had a lot of folks who are like, it was the highlight of my week. I'm still an accountant, but I still love doing it. So
exactly. Yeah. Those people, some really like kick-ass people that are, like you said, a full-time accountant, but he plays Armando every Monday. So they're hilarious,
It's fucking great.
Yeah.
So it's a huge, like, it's, I'll be honest, at first I was like, IO reopening. And then it's like real estate dudes. And then, but as it kept going. Yeah.
To their credit, come on, they're businessmen. They want to make money off this thing.
And we do too. We do too, Katie.
We do too. Exactly. If they make money, then you can throw a couple extra bucks to the actors, and
thank you.
Because we all, that is a big value that we all have as well.
Yes.
It's like, I always go back to when we were first in Comedy Sports, and we're back, and we got paid $15 a show. And it was like just the gesture.
Yes.
Of giving us $15 a show was huge, I thought.
Yes.
And there were times where things got lean and Dave might come and be like, hey, I don't think we're going to be able to do the $15 for the next month. But as of May 1st, we'll be back on and then we'll be caught up. That was always transparent, and it was appreciated. So, but back to what I was saying, these new owners are committed. They understand the crisis that has befell the community in recent years and want IO, they're committed to IO being a safe and diverse space as well. And like I said, they know what they don't know and are putting it in the hands of people that do know how it should be, which is not always the case, I would say.
It's the case for success in any business is I'm not going to hire people who I'm smarter than. I'm going to hire people smarter than me.
100%.
And I'm going to put them in positions to be experts at that. I'm going to trust them and say, hey, you go and do this thing. And I feel like that's the success of these places. So it's an exciting change. And I think there's going to be some rough moments of just addressing things constantly of what's happened. And I'm sure you're going to get more questions about all of this stuff. But in the meantime, you're moving forwards in an exciting direction. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, there are a lot of emotions, valid emotions about all of this. I'm middle-aged, I'm jaded and bitter and dead inside. So I know.
Well, but to be fair, you've been that way for a while.
That's another good hat that you can make. That's perfect.
And you've been jaded and dead inside for 20 years, so it's not. It's on brand.
Fair enough. But these emotions are in the right place, and it's like as much as certainly Gen X represent as much as.
Did you dab?
I just dab, right? That's what kids do, right? Dabbing's
wow.
100%.
That's in. It's I'm sure you fall into this too, Jay. We're around the same age as like, oh, these Gen Zers or these kids, like and their feelings and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's also like, I'm really proud of them for being the ones that are like, no, this is bullshit.
They're giving us hope. They're giving us hope.
Exactly.
But at the same time, I know my partners got twins. They're 16, and they're like, "Don't put all this pressure on us to save your shit."
Right.
And I'm like, I go, that's fair. But like they are aware. They are having these conversations. They're not putting up with the same stuff. And that's why it had to change. It had to change or it's going to die. It would go away. And so the fact that it's like you all are self-aware enough to say like, yep, this has got to change. We're going to find people to help us move in that direction, and we're going to grow. And when there's rewards and there's growing pains as well. So
absolutely.
I think everybody was like, for all the names that were mentioned from in this new management team, everyone's like, okay, cool. Like these are good folks who are going to make an effort at this. So congratulations. It's huge.
Yeah. It is. It's all my jaded bitterness, death inside. It's brought me back to life. It's brought me back to life.
That's great.
So I'm excited. I'm very excited. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Katie, for joining us.
Thank you guys. It was this was like a breeze. I felt like 10 minutes went by.
Well, I've got some hard questions now. So, Katie,
boy. Here we go.
Now it actually starts.
Now he digs up my past.
Right.
Yes. Nope. Those are behind closed doors now.
All right. Well, I got my friend Mitch Green's here, so I got to take off.
You're going to move furniture? Okay.